All right. Welcome, welcome. It is so exciting to see all of these wonderful names and teachers joining us today. We are really just thrilled and overwhelmed that you're able to be here. We know how busy your days are, so thank you for joining us today. And we will get started. Let's just jump right in. We've got lots of fun stuff to do today. So welcome to part 3 of our Decodable Text webinar series. We are talking about effective use of decodable text. I am Dr. Angela Preston, and I have the privilege of welcoming all of you, our stellar North Carolina educators, to our session today. We will experience an example of how to effectively use decodable text following the LETRS Decodable Text routine. So very exciting stuff that we get to share today. Right now we are adding a link to the Q&A. So we will not have the chat available, but the Q&A will be open. And in a moment, you'll be able to see a link to the guided notes document and a second link that will take you to the slides for today. Those will also be linked in. And if it is not hyperlinked, go ahead and just copy the link and then paste it in your browser and you'll be able to access them. The guided notes will force you to make a copy, and you are encouraged to take notes today in the guided notes. The guided notes are the white and purple ones right here, and we encourage you to take notes. If you can't access it online through Google, then just download it to your computer and it will open right up in Word for you. All right, so a few things to know before we get started. Throughout our webinar, we will answer questions in the Q&A. So please use the Q&A as opposed to the chat. When you add something to the Q&A, make sure that you send it to all panelists so that way one of us can answer it and see it. We will review the questions and we will answer them at the end. Our presentation is being recorded, so you will be able to, you'll be able to see the presentation once we have everything all set and ready. And we will add our recording to the OEL website once it's ready. All of the attendees here, that's everyone with us live, will receive a WebEx email immediately after our session today, which will have a link to the handouts from today and a way to access the video. And then you will also get a certificate, so please follow your district's processes for all CEUs. And in order to help everybody get access to our video recording as quick as possible, we're going to try something a little different than we did with the first 2 webinars for part 1 and 2 of the Decodable webinar series. We are going to actually provide this document and it will be live. It's being linked in now through a bit.ly, which is Decodable Routine. Notice the capital D and the capital R so you can access it that way. Once the video recording for today's session is completed, I will hyperlink it in right here in the blue circle, and you'll be able to come back and click that link and that will take you to the video so you can watch the video. So we're hoping this will make it much easier to access the video and the handouts for everybody. So please keep track of this link. Don't download it. It won't work if you download it, but just keep it live, either bookmark it or write down this bit.ly and come back to the bit.ly. But we will have the video up on this document no later than next Friday, which is the 25th, February 25th. And if you stick with us to the very end, I will show you how to access all of the webinars and resources on the OEL website. And that is where we currently have part 1 and part 2. Those handouts are linked on the OEL website. All right, so you are all waiting for our lovely guest speakers today, not just me. So it is my absolute pleasure to be able to introduce our guest speakers today. Doria Sullivan is the account executive for LETRS Professional Learning Solutions at Lexia Voyager Sopris. Throughout her career, Doria has been a fierce advocate for effective literacy instruction. She was a special education teacher in North Carolina, and she was a literacy consultant at DPI for reading research to classroom practice, We are thrilled that she is here with us and excited to hear all that she has to share about decodable text. And, if you know me, I'm all about working with the team. And so it's so great to have her other team members joining us today. I would also like to introduce Angela Rodriguez. She is the account executive for LETRS Professional Learning Solutions at Voyager Sopris, at Lexia Voyager Sopris. She was also a teacher in North Carolina and special education teacher like myself. So we're all kindred spirits here. And she was previously an EC literacy specialist at DPI for reading research to classroom practice and all things literacy. So we are welcoming them back to North Carolina. We're so excited that you all are here. It's very timely, very great work that we've been doing for a long time. So it's great to see this all coming back together. And finally, I would love to introduce Toni Backstrom. She is the manager for Strategic State Solutions. And Toni has been involved with LETRS since its inception almost 20 years ago. And she has worked really hard on the policy side and done amazing things for literacy. So we are really excited to have Toni joining us as well. Angela and Toni will be here in the background to answer your questions, your Q&A, and provide support as well while Doria is presenting. So thank you so much for being here and joining us. And I, without further ado, would love to send this over to Doria. So I will stop sharing my screen and Doria will begin.
Perfect. Hey, everybody. It is so good to see. I was kind of manning the attendees coming on, and there's so many faces, names that I recognize here. So let me go ahead and just logistically share my screen, make sure you guys are seeing everything. And everything good? Can you see it?
Good, Doria.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Okay, so it is super exciting to be part of this important work, advancing the science of reading in North Carolina, and I'm super glad because I feel like I'm coming home. I currently live in Las Vegas, but as Angela mentioned, I was in North Carolina in a variety of roles, from teacher to literacy consultant, but I'm also a national letters trainer. So this work is near and dear to my heart, and I'm just thrilled to be back here with you because over these years you have done just an amazing job with all of our students in North Carolina and really making sure that they become proficient readers. So thanks for having me back. So some housekeeping items. So you have the guided note-taking document to support your learning during the session. It's a nice document because it contains hyperlinks as well as an opportunity to engage with the content as we go through this presentation. And you'll also notice let me move this over here. You'll also notice a purple star at the top of the screen. That's a little indication that it is something that you can engage with on your note-taking document. So whenever you see that, it's kind of your cue to engage with the document if you'd like to. So I'm going to start today off with a really simple question. And again, you can make a note on your document. You can just think and reflect on this. But my question to you is, can we leave reading to guesswork? And you can even shake your head at the screen. And I think the answer is, no, we can't. You're right, we cannot. We have to be intentional about everything we do in our classrooms, every decision we make, every tool we use, every support we build in. Louisa Moats, the author of LETRS, says it best when she says that teaching reading is rocket science. She's so right about that. It really is. So I organized our presentation around some quotes from some reading researchers in our field, and I'm going to start with this one from Dr. Joe Torgeson. He's most known or best known for his work at the Florida Center of Reading Research. And he says, and Anita Archer has said this as well, there is no comprehension strategy powerful enough to compensate for the inability to read the words. You cannot compensate for the fact that you cannot read the words. So that's what today and the sessions you've been engaged with is all about. We have to make sure our students learn to decode the words on the page. This critical task needs to be at the forefront of everything that we do. So just to level set and do a quick review of the day 1 and day 2 sessions provided by the amazing Linda Farrell and Michael Hunter of Readsters. So day 1, you really dove into the what about decodable text. What is it? So in that first session, you compared decodable text and level text. You discussed how decodables are all about early reading instruction, not independent reading. It's all about early reading instruction. I love the caution signs that they had along the way in their presentations. You discussed and you explored some examples of decodable text, what makes them different. What makes them different is they include the words with phonics patterns that have been taught and high frequency words that have been taught. You noticed the purpose, or you noted the purpose and intention of using decodable text, which is really to focus on teaching decoding versus teaching comprehension. It's opportunities for students to practice reading, apply that learning, and develop accuracy. And finally, you learned where decodable passages, decodable text lives on the reading rope. So I know that you've seen this before, and we're all getting really familiar with Scarborough's reading rope and the simple view of reading. So I just want to highlight a few things and try to make as many connections as we can to the work that you're doing. So remember, I'm going to come over here and look at it and circle it myself. Remember that reading is a product, right? Skilled reading, reading comprehension, that's the product. It's a result of word recognition times language comprehension. And I also want to point out 2 itty bitty little words that sometimes get overlooked on this rope, and it's right here. Remember, word recognition made up of those 3 strands, right? They have to become, these strands, we have to become automatic. We want automaticity with phonological awareness, automaticity of decoding the sounds and the symbols, to automaticity of word recognition, which is that sight recognition that we've talked about when we've gone over that rope. And then on the language comprehension, it's increasingly strategic. It starts early, it never ends, building that rope, tying that rope together. We just become more strategic as we go along. But I want to ask you a question, and again, you could fill this out on your guided note-taking document, or you can just answer it in your head. But where does decodable text live on the reading rope? And you're right, it's down here. It's to support word recognition, right? We use decodable text to, again, work on word recognition, and we want our students to become increasingly automatic, right? And we cannot, right? We cannot comprehend the words that we cannot read, right? So that's where decodable text lives on the rope. So I want to give you just about 15 seconds to just think about what was your biggest takeaway from day 1. You can capture it on your note-taking device, or you can just think and reflect on that for a minute. What was your biggest takeaway from your day 1 sessions? So I know my biggest takeaway, just even on this rope slide here, is just to remember that this isn't an either or, because both are important. But until our students are reading, we are the vehicles, the tools, the supports to build that upper strand, that language comprehension strand, which is listening comprehension at first. So this is another powerful quote from Stanislas Dehaene. If you've never read this book, he is definitely, you could see my worn and torn up book. He wrote Reading in the Brain. And this quote reminds me that if we want our students to become readers and not guessers, we have to connect speech to print. Lene Airy tells us that our readers move through stages, phases of reading. And we initially start in this pre-alphabetic, right, pictorial state, if you will, but we instantly want to move them, especially in our years when we have a touch point with our students, into that early alphabetic stage where they're starting to connect letter name, letter, sound. This is the first part of their journey to acquiring literacy. Day 2, quick review. You looked at the why, the when, and the where of decodable text. First and foremost, it allows our students to practice and apply phonics skills. There's a skill hierarchy. We want, again, always to get to that accuracy, and it lives in small group instruction. So as I was writing this presentation, I was trying to come up with an analogy. I'm big on analogies because they kind of speak to us. And I thought, imagine this. I want you to go back in time and imagine that you were 15 and you were learning how to drive, right? And let's just say we show up for driver's ed in a class, and they give us a book or a pamphlet or something to read about how to drive a car, and we have the instructor who's telling us about how to drive a car. But what if we never had the opportunity to apply that knowledge, right? Would we get good at driving a car? The answer is no, right? Better still, how about this scenario? Can you imagine that you learned about driving a car? You read about it, you watched it, and now it's time to apply it, right? And when we go outside to take that driver's test, it's not a car. They pull up with a big tractor trailer. Would we be able to practice those skills? And the answer is no. But that's sometimes what we do when we teach phonics skills to our students. We tell them, pay attention to those letters and those sounds. And then sometimes we hand them a book with few or no words that they can apply this knowledge to. So that's what this day was about, really explaining the why, the when, and the where of decodable text. The why, it's really about reinforcing the skills that they've learned, following that hierarchy, to get our students to be accurate and to get our students to rely on the code. This is the critical work of our guided reading and small group instruction. Another quote from Stanislas Dehaene. Take a second to read that. The word that sticks out to me here is easily. Remember, go back to the reading rope, easily, accurately. We want sight recognition of these words, right? We want automaticity, and how we get there is through practice. So let's pull it all together today and let's connect some dots. So in today's session, we're going to continue defining the why. I say, tell me more about that why. It's really, again, that focus on sound, symbol connections, because it builds neuronal pathways, it supports orthographic mapping, and it enables cognitive focus on comprehension. When our students read decodable text, decodable passages, and they apply their knowledge of the letter sound connection, processing all the letters within the words, they develop an orthographic representation of the word. So in essence, decoding practice enables our readers to eventually get to a place where they can store those written words in memory. Our instruction creates this superhighway in our brain so that eventually, again, these words can be read by sight. Not sight words, can be read by sight. And we want all words to be sight words for our students. Go back to that quote from Louisa Moats, teaching reading is rocket science. We're all rocket scientists. We're all brain surgeons in essence, because remember, one of the things you first learn on your science of reading journey is we were not born to read, right? We are not wired to read. We have that wiring, those connections in the left hemisphere have to be taught to us. So in essence, when we are doing this work, this important work, we're really rewiring our students' brains through our instruction and the instructional tools that we use. So that this last bullet is super important here. We want our students to be so automatic that they can focus their mental energy on comprehension rather than word recognition, because comprehension is the ultimate goal of reading. So this comes straight from our LETRS text, and it's really the very core of this why. Decodables are supports for our students, especially as they begin this difficult journey on learning how to read. When texts are predictable or leveled, there's less opportunity to practice the pattern taught. And students are often confronted with words that they have not learned to read yet. When they're confronted by words they don't have the tools to read, right? They're not able to read. It forces them to look at the beginning of the unknown word and do what? Guess. They guess based on context. They guess based on overall shape of the word. And this is an inefficient, ineffective way to read. There was a study that was done in 1985, and it found that students who were exposed to early on, and in the study, students who read decodable text early on, and tried to sound out the words more often than students who were read text prompted, they use other cues. And we know our students, are better students in the long run were the ones who relied on this quote, on this code. So another little tidbit of information to just think about here is remember that about 86% of our words in English are pretty regular. 50% of them, they have this direct sound symbol relationship for reading and for spelling. About 36% of our words can actually be read or spelled accurately. They're just about one sound off. So our code is very predictable, right? We need to teach our students to rely on that. And another quote, a little bit longer, so I'll give you a second to read this one. This is really important. Sometimes I ask my audiences when I'm presenting, would you say that there's lots of different ways our students learn how to read? Do all students learn to read the same way or differently? And this is something that settled science has told us, and it's that all children have the same reading brains. All. This settled science has shown us that there is a way to get 95% of our students reading with high levels of comprehension. So now it's really up to us to embrace this work. So when you were going through LETRS, and some of you are going to be taking LETRS in the future, you do a little bit about the brain. And I love Stanislas Dehaene in Reading in the Brain, and he reminds us, he says, sometimes as teachers, we know more about the workings of our car than the workings of the brains of our students, right? And it makes sense. We have to have some understanding of our brain because it allows us then to teach to the brain, to the reading brain, which is the left hemisphere. So this was a study that was done, very powerful. Simos and colleagues worked with students with dyslexia, and they offered about 16 weeks of intensive intervention aimed at improving reading skills. So the researchers at first looked at the patterns of brain activation during reading before and after a phonic sound symbol intervention. And they found that instruction rewires the brain. So I'll kind of unpack this for you. So here are students who cannot decode nonsense words. They cannot decode. Again, they can't put those sound symbol connections in here. So on the left hemisphere of the brain, we want to see this activation, right? In the back area here, which is all about this, like knowing a word. It's your piggy bank of words that you can kind of easily and automatically recognize. And then you have this frontal lobe, which is all about the sounds, right? So after instruction, look at what happened. Bam, that's what we want to see. We want to see this kind of like bing, bing, bing. Our eyes are taking in the print, activating a visual. The word is like a sight word, activates the sound, activates the meaning. And this right here, making this connection from the back of the left hemisphere to the front of the left hemisphere, that happens through instruction. That is not wired. We are not wired for this. It happens. Connecting those sounds to print happens through instruction. So the big takeaway here, not to get lost in the weeds, is we're like brain surgeons, right? We know that we can rewire our students' brains through good instruction, and we know that we have to build this superhighway here. So the best way to do it is by instructing in those sound, symbol, and giving them an opportunity to apply, to learn about, and then apply these sound symbol connections. So again, I'm going to give you just a quick second to reflect for just a second. What's your biggest takeaway here? Okay, so remember my first question. Let's get into it right now. What was my question? Can we leave reading to guesswork? And I know you all answered no. So today, what it's all about, we're going to look at, again, taking all this information into now what, the how. So we know in early stages, beginning or struggling readers, they need to read books that target particular developmental stages. We have to be informed. We have to be intentional when it comes to selecting the right decodable text. And I know you talked about that the last time you were in a session 2, I believe. So the most important is we have to select decodable text that includes the phonics patterns, the skills that we're working on, and or patterns they've already learned. Then, second, is we use a routine. You can fill that word in on your note-taking document. And finally, we just want to recognize that there really isn't a one-size-fits-all in reading instruction. Some students need additional supports to build those neural pathways. And we'll explore some supports that we can offer our developing readers. So another quote for you to just read and think about, and then I'm going to ask you a question. We do not recognize a printed word through holistic grasping of its contour, its shape, but because our brain breaks it down into letters and graphemes, letter or letters that spell a sound. So what common practice in our classroom speaks to this quote? We do not recognize printed word through its contour or shape. Our brains are actually processing those letters and letter sounds. And I know you're thinking it's word walls, huh? So just to kind of throw that out there, you know, it's really exciting to see a movement in a shift away from this practice, knowing what the science tells us. We read letter by letter, not word by word. We want our students to pay attention to and notice every letter in every word, and we never want them to guess on the overall shape of a word. Teaching reading's rocket science. We want to dismantle all of those practices that do not support the science. We do not want our students to form this dependency on shape and picture and guess, because these are all strategies that poor readers use. So where do I start? How do I do this? You start with assessment and intention. We need to know which phonics skills our students have mastered, which ones they're struggling with, and which ones they need to learn and by when. And when it comes to phonics skills, we want mastery of all skills. So I know that sometimes as educators, we have that like 80% number floating around in our head. Well, if they're, you know, at 80%, like we can move on. Things are good, right? But when it comes to phonics skills, we want mastery of all of those skills. So that's why we say intention. It's really important to be intentional and to perhaps even use an intentional scope and sequence that we don't sometimes need to create on our own. Some really smart reading researchers have done this for us. So on your handout document, page 2 and page 3 of your handouts, this is an example of a LETRS scope and sequence. It's also, for those of you who are going through the course right now, it's Appendix B2 and B3. So again, there's no one size fits all. Remember that. There is no one accepted scope and sequence in the field because students' achievement levels are going to vary as they progress gradually. But they're all going to follow in a research-based scope and sequence progress going from simple to complex linguistic constructions. And you're going to see a lot of similarities in them. The letters, I just want to point out some things that are a little bit different and very interesting, I think, because we always think of reading and spelling as one, which a lot of times, and it starts off at first, that there is that direct correlation. What we read, we spell. What we spell, we read. They go together. But on the letter scope and sequence, we really talk through, here's our scope and sequence of, again, simple to complex. And you'll notice it is for reading and for spelling. And that's interesting because you do see right here, there are some things again for reading, for example, silent letter combinations, Anglo-Saxon words. We're going to expect our students, we're going to do some instruction and expect them to work to mastery of those in second grade for reading, but we know for spelling, sometimes that comes together in third grade. So again, big idea, scope and sequence is important. It's that intentionality. It's, going to be research driven from simple to complex. There is no one accepted scope and sequence in the field. This is one you can use if you do not have one. Also, just putting it all together, we want to follow, it's that intention routine. We want to follow almost a scope and sequence, if you will, for a lesson plan, for a phonics lesson plan. So here is a LETRS general phonics lesson plan template. And what it is, it's a 45-minute roadmap really outlining some key components of a phonics lesson to support our developing readers. And again, if you're using a research-based program, evidence-based program, you're going to see a lot of overlap in the phonics lesson plan. And if you're not, here's a template to support you. But again, roadmap of all the different components that we want to see in like a estimated about 45-minute lesson. You're going to have the purpose, practice sound, review, introduce new concept, provide guided practice, extended practice, an element of dictation. That's unique to the LETRS Phonics lesson plan template. We want to always remember to take that speech to print, and dictation helps us with that. On the bottom, connecting a word meaning. Remember I said earlier, what is the purpose of decodable text? It's for phonics instruction for sure, but remember I said it's not one or the other. We want to always take an opportunity to tap into that language comprehension, right? We can do that with decodable text and through our phonics work with phonics. But finally, I want to point out this bottom part right here. This is the intentionality of decodable text. And it says that's the last part of a good phonics lesson. We want to read decodable text with a high proportion of words that have been taught. Again, practice, application, building a superhighway in the brain. So this is a more visual representation of kind of everything I've been talking about here. So research tells us that phonics instruction should be based on that predetermined scope and sequence of skills. I told you that sometimes they're going to be different depending on if you're using one program versus another, but if they are research-based or evidence-based programs, you're going to see some overlap here. For example, you might intimately know whatever program you're using if you're using one. So this is the LETRS scope and sequence. A lot of times we say val R combinations. It might be R controlled that come before VCE. We have VCE or Magic E before val R combinations. But think of it like, again, this is the scope and sequence. We're going from more simple, working our way to more complex phonics skills. So remember, we have to rely on the scope and sequence to make sure all students learn all these skills, and decodable text is used throughout. So my question to you is, you could fill this in your handout or just think it in your head, where does decodable text belong? When should we use it? What do you think? You got it. It's all along the journey. So when I am teaching my students that VC pattern, I'm going to use decodable text. Perhaps it's the word it. When I'm teaching CVC, I'm going to use decodable text that have CVC patterns, cat. When I teach consonant vowel, open syllable, yep, you got it. I'm going to have decodable text that has that pattern in it. So that decodable text is going to be used all along their journey as you move from simple to complex, which again, takes, when I go back to that scope and sequence from letters, we're talking some of these patterns, more complex patterns, happen second grade, third grade, right? Beyond sometimes. So we want to see and use decodable text all along this journey when we're teaching our students to read, to decode. So here is the LETRS guidance for effective use of decodable text. If you have your LETRS manual, or if you've been through LETRS, it's in your manual on page 220. If not, no worries. You'll eventually see this, and I'll go over most of the highlights and kind of truncate it down a little bit more digestible for you today. But the big idea here is it's guidance. It's a routine. Anita Archer, a proponent for the research behind explicit and systematic instructional practices. That's what this is all about. We're really giving you a step 1, 2, 3, and 4 because it's a routine. We want to be systematic, explicit, follow that routine. It's incremental, and it allows us to provide practice applying this knowledge to text. So the big idea here, we want to support our readers to achieve maximum success when they are learning how to read. So just like the scope and sequence I was telling you about, there really isn't one, right? One size fits all. There are many routines out there, and they're really all quite good. So let's just look at 2 routines. You're going to see some overlap. And these were pulled from some of the work in LETRS as well as Readsters. But again, I told you there's a lot of routines out there. But the big idea here is it's a routine. It's being done explicitly, systematically. So in the LETRS decodable routine or guidance for using decodable text, you're going to see that the first step is to review the words, then phrases, then sentences. So again, words, phrases, then sentences. Then you will, and this is done, by the way, in isolation. What is the point here? Again, just support that decoding, doing your instruction, getting to recognition, and eventually automaticity. Then we want to preview the text. What do we do here? We browse the pictures. We get a feel for the topic. Ooh, did I just say look at the pictures? Yes, but not for reading. We're not teaching our students to use the pictures to read. We're teaching them that those pictures sometimes support us for getting a feel about the topic. During the preview time, it could be that we highlight some of the words in the text, depending if it's a decodable text that is consumable or not. Then you want to discuss the topic. What do the students already know? What are their experiences? Background knowledge. And finally, we read and we reread and we discuss. And there's a variety of things you can do here. It could be choral read, partner read, individual read, anything. But we want to get them in that text a few times, not just that one time. So that's the letters on the top, but you'll notice here's another routine on the bottom. Look at the overlap here. You're going to review words and phrases in isolation, same. Highlight the target words in the passage, then read those targeted words in isolation, similar. With this one, you then move away from reading highlighted words to reading an unmarked passage. Okay, that could be right here with our read and reread. And finally, a check for comprehension, which is our opportunity up here to discuss. Because again, not this or that. We're going to try to embed comprehension. Is it as rich decodable text for comprehension? But we can still do some comprehension work tapping into those upper strands of the reading rope during this time. So again, big idea here. There's a lot of routines. Letters, we think our routine is fantastic. You're going to have an opportunity to, again, use that routine, see that routine in the manual if you have not taken the letters Unit 3 yet. It's coming up if not. And otherwise, you have it on your guided notes as just a good routine to rely on. Okay. So that was a lot of talk on my behalf, but now we want to give you the opportunity to kind of see it in action, because sometimes that really helps us, right? Like we get a lot of sit and get professional learning opportunities, but sometimes it's just good to see something in practice. So when you do take letters, know that when you're in the LETRS online platform in Unit 3, you'll have access to some other video vignettes that support the use of decodable text and show some of these routines. But this is another one that you can get to on the web, and it is from our colleagues in IES, and this is I think it's called Video 29 Decodable Text, but there is a hyperlink on your document that will take you right to it. But as I play this video, I want you to do two things. And again, use your note-taking document to take some notes here. I want you to watch with a purpose. And I want you to look for examples of that explicit systematic decoding instruction. And then I also want you to notice how many opportunities the students have to successfully apply those decoding skills. Because again, that's what's building this superhighway to making those words, like where the students have to decode to eventually it becomes a word they instantly and automatically recognize. Okay, so you'll also notice a few other good things with this video, which is the I do, we do, you do going on here. Okay, so I just want to, again, my colleagues in the back here, just let me know if you are able to see this.
Yes, we've got it, Doria. We can see it.
Okay, great.
It is important to provide students with opportunities to practice the letter sound and sound spelling patterns taught in the classroom using word lists, decodable sentences, short decodable texts, or texts that contain many examples of words spelled with recently learned letter sounds or sound spelling patterns.
So today we're going to make some words and read words that have the long E sound, and we're going to learn some different ways to spell the long E sound. So this word is seed. What's the word? Seed. When there's two E's together in a word, they stand for the long E sound, the sound we hear in the middle of seed. So it says E. So when I touch under E, you're going to say E. E. I'm going to put the S and the D back. When I do my finger under the word, you're going to say the whole word, seed. When I touch under the E, you're going to say E. So let's try it a few times. Seed. E. Seed. E. Good. This word is meat. What word is it? Meat. In meat, there's EA in the middle. And most of the time when EA is together, it also represents the long E sound, the sound in the middle of meat. So it says E. So when I touch under EA, I want you to say E. 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 When I do my finger under, I want you to read the whole word. Meat. E. Meat. E. Good. All right, so we're going to practice reading both words now. And when I touch under just the EA or the EE, you'll say E. Meat. Seed. E. E. Meat. Seed. E. E. Good. Like how you're reading it so nicely. I'm going to give you a word list now. And on the word list, you're going to take your pencil and you're going to underline any time you see EA or EE together. Sometimes there's going to be just an E by itself. That's going to be the short E sound, and it's going to say eh. And some words won't have any E's in it at all. So just underline the EE or the EA for the long E sound. You can practice reading the words in your head while you do that. And actually, could you say E every time you underline it? E. 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 We're going to read the words together now. And we're going to sound it first, and then we'll read it. So we'll say eat, and then read meat. Okay, so let's start at the top, and we're going to go down the first column. You can point with your finger or with your pencil. So let's start at the first word. Ready? Meat. Meat. Ear. Ear. Start at the top of the next column. A says E, so try that one again, sound it. Tree. So you did a nice job of reading the words, and so now I'm going to give you a little story, and it's called Up in the Trees. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look through it and see what words you can find that have the EA or the EE. You're going to underline them and read them as you do that, okay? Can you say the sound E when you underline it too?
Mm-hmm. Can be done by underlining, highlighting.
E.
I'm going to fast forward just a little bit here.
Find in the story that had the EA or the EE. Addison, what did you find? I don't see lots of things.
That's again finding those words in isolation. Now she worked with them in isolation. Now they're finding them in the text. And then we're going to get into
easy see tree. A little bit about it. It's about birds that live in the tree.
doing a little bit of that work again, tapping into those top portion of the strand, right? Language comprehension, we're always searching for meaning of text, and that's what's happening here as she goes over a little preview. And finally, the students will get into the text.
Owl. And then that's owl. What is the owl? The owl. It's the owl on the book. Owl. And so the book is going to tell you about the. Let's start together. Some birds are easy to hear, but hard to see. Owls are easy to hear, but hard to see.
So again, one example, hoping I can get my screen back. Yeah, I can. One example of the use of decodable text in a routine, and hopefully you did see some of those examples of that explicit systematic instruction and the opportunities for the students to successfully apply those decoding skills. Not a one-size-fits-all, a lot of ways you can tackle this, but this is the work, the good work of that small group instruction, those guided reading groups, making sure that we, follow a scope and sequence and make sure that we touch upon and go over all of the phonics skills that our students need to have, right, in order to be good readers. So this is another, it's a kind of a busy slide here. So let me unpack it for you. But this is the transfer to text process, which is really a systematic approach to build our students' persistence in text reading, promoting the transfer of learned skills to actual reading, which helps with fluency, automaticity. So in this routine, and this routine might not be for every student, this might be that support I was talking about earlier, that you can do. The other video was what we can do in our small group guided reading time instruction, right? And this is another routine for, again, working maybe with some developing readers. It's great if you can do it with all students, but if you don't have the time, this might be something that we use as another additional support for our students. So you can see that this is a Monday through Friday routine. Here are the explicit systematic steps in this routine. And you'll also notice that you use 3 passages of decodable text. So it's going to be the same phonics pattern. So if it was CVC, I have passage 1 that has CVC, passage 2, a different passage with CVC patterns, and finally a third passage with CVC patterns. So the big idea here is look at the levels of support that we are gradually taking away. So with passage 1 on Monday, we're going to highlight those words, that pattern. We're going to read those highlighted words. We're going to read the passage with the highlighted words, and then we reread a clean copy of that text. On Tuesday, look what happened. I took away the highlight. I went right into reading the text with the highlighted words and then reading a clean copy. Another scaffold removed here. Now I do another CVC passage, highlighting the words, but now I'm not going to have them read them in isolation. We're just going to read the text of highlight and read the clean copy. Then on Thursday, look, all of those supports are gone except for reading the clean copy. And then on Friday, passage 3, a brand new passage, same pattern, they're just going to read the clean copy. So this is the transfer to text process, thankful of Susan Hall and 95% group that allowed us to use it and embed it into our LETRS coursework. But it is really a great routine, again, for supporting our students going through a week-long routine. But the critical part here is you have to have 3 consumable pieces of decodable text. So I know that in North Carolina, some of my colleagues were using West Virginia Phonics. Great. They provide lessons that follow our lesson plan template, and they provide 3 passages of decodable text for most of the phonics skills that you're covering. So that is one way to get to this. Also, we have power readers. These are great, forms of consumable text for our students that pull out vocabulary words as well. And I know the last time you were together for day 2, I think you were provided the Reading League's list of decodable texts that they just published in November. They update that continuously. There are some free resources out there and then some for purchase, but I know that you have access to that Reading League on your DPI Science of Reading website. Okay, so we're coming full circle here. So just remember this. Word recognition is important, but vocabulary, oral language, and background knowledge make the difference between a competent reader and a fabulous reader. Although learning to decode the words is crucial, it's just remember not the complete formula, right, to reading and comprehension at deep levels. It's not a this or that, but until our students are independently decoding the words on the page, we have to be the vehicle for vocabulary, oral language, and background knowledge. We work on those top portions of the strand. That's why it's language comprehension, and sometimes you see it as listening comprehension. The top part of the reading rope can be taught through listening comprehension because knowing what the words mean once they're decoded, that's key for comprehension. So that's like the big takeaway I think I want to leave you with today. It's not a this or that, but we do know that this is critical. Teaching our students to decode, giving them an opportunity to practice, apply, form a superhighway in their brain, allows them eventually that automaticity, freeing up their brain for comprehension. That's what it's going to take to make a really solid, skilled reader. I also want to point out one thing, and I know that it was mentioned the last time you were with our Readster colleagues, but just remember that sometimes we project our dislike of decodable text onto the students. We sometimes feel like they're not interesting, they're not robust enough, right? But they are to the students when they're learning how to read because they're reading themselves. They're excited, they're motivated because they feel successful. So just don't forget that. There's a purpose for this text. It's in instruction, it's for application, and it allows our students to be successful. So this is a quote from Kim Gibbons. We have to follow the science of reading to give all of our students the skills and opportunities needed to succeed. She says that literacy is the greatest social justice issue of our time. I couldn't agree more. Reading equity starts with us. It starts with us, the teachers. We've got to follow the science. We have to close those reading gaps for our students. And I'm going to hit that number again. How many of our students should be reading with high levels of fluency and comprehension? What's that magic number? 95%. If we follow the science, if we are intentional about what we're doing, if we know a little bit about the reading brain and how to teach it, right, dismantling all those things that don't work, right, that's when we're going to get closer and closer to that number. So, whew, that was a lot of information. I have you for a few more minutes here, so I just want you to pause and reflect. So on your note-taking document, your guided notes, there's space for notes, perhaps even some questions. So I want you to just try to do this one thing. Capture what was your biggest takeaway from today's session? What resonated most with you? Perhaps even what are your next steps related to decodable text? So I give you a second to just reflect there. What was your biggest takeaway? So we have just a few minutes left. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure that's one thing. It's always hard when you're presenting to notice the questions when they're coming in. So colleagues, if you're in the background and you have anything for me, I'd be happy to answer your questions. But also know that we're going to capture your questions. You can even type them into that Q&A part of the box, and we'll capture them and we'll answer them, and perhaps even my DPI colleagues, if we can post that somewhere on the Science of Reading page, that would be fantastic. But we just want you to know that we're here for you, to support you on this journey, and we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Doria, this is Casey. We do have a few questions in the chat box that I'd like to share with you.
Sure.
So the first one is a request for you to say the names of the consumable resources you mentioned again.
Sure. And these were on one of the handouts from Linda Farrell from day 1 or day 2 when she gave you a list of the decodable resources. Power Readers was at the very top there. Susan Ebers created these, and they're just fantastic. And also, again, free, right? West Virginia Phonics. Just look for whatever phonics skill you are teaching at that moment. Find that lesson, click on it. It will open up to a lesson plan template, and this is what they pretty much look like. It's about 9 pages. It will have the lesson, and then at the very back, there are 3 passages of decodable text to use.
And a second question asks if you know the grade level of the children in the video.
First grade. Great question.
Thank you. And then one of the other questions said that as teachers follow the scope and sequence for decodable routines, will there ever be a time that students will move to leveled text? And if so, what data would support that move forward?
It's when they're reading, right? That's when, and that's where there's a lot of debate out there, and it's hard to find. But I really pointed out when I pointed out the bottom of that lesson plan template where it's at a high proportion of decodability. We want to make sure our students, you know, you hear sometimes the accuracy number around 95%. That's like independent reading, 95%. We at LETRS say it's closer to 98% accuracy we want to see in our readers. So that is a slippery slope because some students are acing, and you can use a phonics assessment to see if they have all of those skills, and then yes, get them into text for sure, get them into text. But if you're teaching, teaching reading, if you're teaching decoding, word recognition, and they don't have those skills yet, that's the better work in that small group instruction, guided reading, right? It's not to toss them a book of words that they cannot read, right? Because what's the purpose of it? It's to teach them the phonics skills. We're not working on comprehension at this time. We're working on decoding.
Thank you, Doria. One final question that was in the chat. How does this align with Orton Gillingham and Words Their Way?
Let's talk about Orton Gillingham. So you're going to see Orton Gillingham think of it more of like a methodology, right? And depending on how you were trained in Orton Gillingham, everybody kind of has their own way of interpreting, Orton Gillingham. But you're going to see a lot of overlap in the scope and sequence. Recipe for reading, that's what Orton Gillingham sometimes uses, that has the scope and sequence. You're going to see again a lot of overlap with the letter scope and sequence with Orton Gillingham based programs. So yeah, I always go back to, use it all. That's one thing I think as a teacher, a science of reading educator over the years, and the more I know, I always laugh now and I say I could probably teach reading from a People magazine because what I do is use a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's why LETRS is nice, because it's program agnostic. We're saying that you can layer this work onto anything, program you're using. It's not one or the other. It's really just building your toolkit to just make really solid instructional decisions.
Thank you so much, Doria. I think that concludes our questions and our time for today. And
Great.
I'll turn it back over to Angela. Angela, there she is.
Hi again. I will share my screen real quick and show you how to access the website, our OEL website for the webinars. Otherwise, if you already know where they are, we will see you out in the schools, and we really appreciate all that you do for our students and to bring literacy in the hands of our kids. So to access your website, here we go. As soon as this is done, actually it's probably already in your box. I think it went out at 4. You should have received a follow-up email that just kind of says, thank you. It's the WebEx email itself. So keep that. That's the link with the bit.ly to that flyer that you saw. The flyer has the handouts, and it will have that recording by Friday of next week. If you would like to join or to find where are these actually housed on our website, using this bit.ly here, which is all caps OEL NCDPI. We are the Office of Early Learning, so OEL NCDPI. Put that in your browser. That'll take you to our webpage, and from there you can click on Early Literacy, and that will take you to the Early Literacy page, which takes you, click on the Science of Reading, which takes you to our Science of Reading page. From here, just scroll down, and we have a table of Science of Reading resources, and all of our webinars are under the Modules and Webinars tab, and they are housed in this table down here. All right, well, we thank you so much for being here. Please check out our website. We have other Science of Reading resources, and Doria, Angela, Tony, Casey, Tad, I so appreciate all of you being here with us today. Doria, you are fabulous. We just appreciate all of the knowledge that you've shared with us and everything. So thank you very much.
Go North Carolina. You guys are doing the good work. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And thank you, teachers, for taking time today to join us and for your great questions at the end. We really appreciate it.